When people write every day for a few minutes on something that's important, valuable, anxiety provoking for them, their research showed that like after a few months, they looked at the participants and they found that their well-being of the group that has written about relevant things has significantly improved. And there was even weight loss. They even reported weight loss for those who wanted to lose weight. They reported weight loss because obviously we tend to kind of indulge in things when we're stressed and the cortisol is high.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Triumph podcast, the mental health podcast based in beautiful, gorgeous Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, why we are different is because we are organic, we are authentic, we are never ever scripted, and we don't shy away to talk about mental health from every angle. But one that we are particularly interested in is that inner voice, the inner critic that we call the talker, that we all share, really. And all our guests bring exceptional stories and tools and techniques to how maybe improve our mental health, maybe quiet down the talker or improve relationship with the talker. I'm not the important one. In these conversations, our guests are our wonderful guests, and today is no exception. We have a wonderful individual that's joined us in today's episode. Viktoria is a registered counselor and a psychotherapist, a coach, a founder of Global Therapy with Viktoria. And get this, with 15 or over 15 years of experience and a heart that's traveled the world, she helps people find clarity, courage, calm. In this episode, we'll explore her personal journey because we all have one, through anxiety in relationships, the power of differentiation, and how to stop believing everything the inner talker says. I am so pleased and looking forward to this conversation. Viktoria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for this beautiful introduction. I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely. No, I'm sure words are not enough because professionals like you are the real heroes that work and help the community improve the mental health at large, which is amazing. Now, first question that we have as a starter is a very open-ended and is to tell us a little bit about why and how you got into the world of mental health.
Fantastic question. We slightly touched on it in a
Yes.
sense that I think most people who go into mental health field had their personal journey, and
Yes.
I'm no exception. I imagine you picked onto my website and had a look
Yes.
where I quite vividly describe my journey into this and my own struggles. I think they sort of the buildup of my anxiety happened when I entered university. I had a bit more before that, but the university was probably the height of my anxiety, especially social anxiety, just moving through crowds. It felt like I felt really exposed. I had a relationship, my first boyfriend, and there's a lot of stress around that, jealousy. Like I really didn't know how to navigate these feelings. There's a lot of complex feelings. I imagine a lot of like young people can relate when you hit,
Yes.
adolescence and then later like you become a young adult. This is a lot to handle.
Yes, it is.
Probably for the current generation, even more given the social media and the phones. At least that was not happening through that back then.
Agreed. Agreed. I think it's even more difficult today.
Oh yeah, hats off to the current generations. So yeah, I was just feeling a lot of anxiety, and it kind of coincided with my mom moving away to Europe for 2 years. So I was a young adult adjusting to university life, and she moves away, and she was one of the biggest supports in my life. I think she really helped me manage anxiety. She moves abroad for work, and so I ended up kind of somewhat being on my own. I had my dad, but my dad is a quite reserved person.
Okay. And where is that happening? In which country?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm living in Canada. I'm living in Canada. I'm going to UBC, University of British Columbia.
Yes.
Shout out to UBC
UBC?
graduates. So yeah, I'm here. Yes. And I already speak pretty good English because I'm originally not from Canada. I originally came from Russia when I was 16. That's my journey. Yeah. So I'm struggling basically. My main support is overseas. And one time, and I kid you not, it sounds like a made up story, but it's not. I'm sitting at night feeling anxious, can't sleep, and watching infomercials. I don't know if the current generations even know the infomercials.
I think they're still going on, but maybe not the same way we used to see them, right?
Yeah, they're still going on. They're still happening, but essentially it's like really long commercials, really long drawn out commercials selling products at night. They would only really run at night. And so I'm sitting there and there's this woman, her name is Lucinda Bassett. I remember till this name.
Wow.
The advertisement was for this program for anxiety and depression.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were running like a program that they would advertise that you could order, and they send you
To fix your
tapes.
anxiety, to fix the anxiety. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, we
they
should all
had,
have that. Can we all order that product?
I don't know if that still even exists. We are talking about early 2000s here, right? Like early 2000s. That's what
So
we're
I'm
talking
curious,
about.
did you order that product? You're probably gonna go
I
there, but
did. I did. That's what came over me because it was quite an investment. It was like $400 or $500, which at that
whoa.
point, being a student, it was a really big investment for me. But that's how desperate I was, I think. I think I was that desperate where I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. I feel just so many emotions. I don't know how to process them.
Yes.
So, but they were doing this fantastic advertisement, like interviewing people before and after.
Well, they're fixing the fix you need, right? I mean, at this
The
time.
fix you need, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. My judgment is not most clear,
Okay, I'm writing down because a lot of questions are coming to mind.
of course.
The first one is, and a big one, I guess. When I see you and I've talked to you a little bit, you've got this vibrant, smiley personality, and it's really hard to imagine you with anxiety, right? And I mean, I understand this is a big question because sometimes we put faces
Mhm.
when we interact with socially. But how did you get from that point that maybe you are going to tell us from person with anxiety in college, investing $500 in that product to where you are today?
Yeah, it is definitely was a journey, Alex. I agree. Not to say that I don't have anxiety these days. It does happen, but it's certainly not in that amount of time. And I do want to maybe point out, yes, there's a lot of self-development I've done and work, but I think there another context is that the level of control you gain in life as you progress through life, right? Like once you establish yourself, once you have a career, it does also start to reduce your anxiety, even if you have not done any interpersonal work. I think that also was a big contributing factor
Yes.
that I
Yes.
cannot ignore, right?
Correct.
Like one of the most highest anxiety people can encounter is being out of job.
Correct.
And I actually worked as an employment counselor, so
Oh my God.
can can attest to that. So like people who, I don't know how it would be like if I struggled with that, that probably would pretty skyrocket my anxiety
Yes.
because yeah, it's very destabilizing
It
because
is.
it's
It is.
part of our identity.
Yes, it is. And I mean, I think because so much of what we've created as community depends on you having an income, whether it's a job or your business goes down. And I feel like the talker connects that with security, with validity, with who you are. So if that's not there, it's a big trouble, right?
Absolutely. Yes, it can be quite devastating for
Yeah.
us.
Okay. So we'll get into that in the second part of the conversation. But
Mhm.
I'm now curious. You bought the product, it arrived at your door, and then
Yeah, it did. And you know what? It didn't disappoint. Unlike other products you get off
okay,
commercials,
okay,
the exercise things, they
yes,
didn't actually disappoint. But the whole program, it was CBT based, so cognitive
uh,
behavioral therapy based.
yes.
And it was tapes, those cassette tapes.
Cassette tapes. So for the young audience, those things existed not too long ago with cassette tapes. And I used to, you can rewind them and you can
Mhm.
like put them in a cassette player, obviously. And you had one of those.
Oh, of course, yes. Yes, so I started listening. There was also not a booklet where you can do exercises. What's the
Yeah,
name for
like
that?
like a workout plan maybe,
Yes,
or
workbook,
like,
workbook,
yeah,
exactly,
workbook.
workbook. So there was a workbook, there were cassettes, and I would listen, and some of them I would listen over and over. And then one big part of it, you had to really challenge your thoughts. So you would have this cognitive kind of thinking traps. Like, for example, an example of thinking trap would be, no one likes me, right? Or they're thinking this about me, right?
Mhm.
It was called a mind reading thinking trap. And that was a big one for me. So whenever you counter, you have to like really notice these thinking traps. You have to pay attention. And then you take a notepad and you write out the thought you're having and then you challenge it. And you repeat it over and over and over and over. So you have to like really put effort into it for it to
Yes,
work.
yes.
But I was so fed up with these thinking traps. I was like, I'm gonna do it.
So you were disciplined.
Yeah, I felt like that was the only way out for me.
Yes. Okay. So this is interesting. I had no idea. I mean, I know that those infomercials and they probably happen in different forms, maybe on social media nowadays, but most of them they sell little gadgets, improve your posture or the machine to lose weight or whatever. And most of them are scam, I think, right? Many of them, right? They
Mhm.
don't necessarily work and they are expensive. But what you're describing is something that at that time really was what you needed. And it sounds like it gave you that support at the moment.
Absolutely. Like I think this was not a scam. This was a legitimate program, but it would only work if you put in the work,
Well, of
right?
course.
Like so it really depends on how much you invest in it afterwards with your time and energy for it to work. But it was actually not a scam, it was legit. And it was really helpful in my life at that point. I think it was a turning point for me in terms of becoming counselor. Like I had a word anxiety, like to describe my state, which I did not have. Like language is so valuable for us to be able to name the challenge to be able to overcome it.
Yes. Wow. Okay. You're the first person I meet that used a product like that, right?
And
Of the late night TV commercials to actually start the journey, a healing journey, maybe we can call it, right? At the
yeah,
time,
yeah, of course.
right? So I mean, wonderful. You can attract it what you needed at the moment. And then what happened? Like you obviously continued on that path.
Well, as I kind of become started to learn more and more about anxiety, these tapes, I would also be somebody who enjoyed talking to my friends, supporting them, helping them, analyzing things. And it really kind of got me to this place where I wanted to be able to use this skill set that I kind of gained. And that led me to the journey of psychology and then eventually becoming a registered clinical counselor.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's not what you wanted to do when you were growing up. You didn't know. That wasn't like, oh, at age 10, for example, this is what I want to be, helping people with their mental struggles. That came later as a result of your experience.
No, yeah, exactly. It came later because I didn't even know really that profession existed. Like I knew there was a psychologist as a profession, and I was at one point something I considered, but I have a family of scientists who were really emphasizing science as something that I need to study. So psychology wasn't very much on the radar, even though it's a science, don't get me wrong. Science is, as I should
Hard
emphasize,
facts.
like
Hard
biology,
facts.
yeah, like chemistry, things like
Yes.
that.
So, I mean, your family, I'm curious. I mean, you said your father was reserved a scientist, so he probably a guy who focuses on the facts, on the, kind of the maybe even the old way of doing things. And then
Uh-huh.
psychology or even mental health at large could at times feel a bit, could to a person like that, could feel a bit out there. Could they, was it a shock to them or were they supportive?
So you can actually, I don't know how that is now, but when I was at university in early 2000s, you could pursue psychology degree for two paths, either for a science degree or for arts degree.
Okay, I've heard that
And
actually.
so
Yes.
I just stayed in a science degree as to not, upset.
Yes. You packaged it nicely, right?
Yes. So it basically kind of it became like in your science and psychology degree, right? But in the science realm, so that it felt comfortable for me and comfortable for my parents at that time.
That makes sense. You mentioned that personal journey factor, like studying aside, as a anybody practicing in the mental health world, I think you mentioned it's so important that you went through it yourself. Like we talked about anxiety and your personal journey. Is it a mandatory part in order to become a good practitioner to have walked that in the shoes or walked that walk, I guess?
It's a very interesting way to look at it. I think it does enhance our level of empathy when we have gone for a certain experience. But of course, you can still be empathetic and you can imagine what pain feels like, anxiety feels like, whether you have gone through like extreme versions of it or not. I do not believe it's essential because I obviously meet with clients who have gone through extreme painful things that I have not been through, right? But I can empathize with pain and hurt they feel because we all have felt anxiety, hurt, and pain. So I
Yes.
wouldn't say it's a prerequisite,
No.
but I think encountering some level of challenges in your life, having life experience, does deepen you and helps you gain wisdom.
Yes. Maybe I can rephrase or kind of reform the question a
Okay.
bit. If you have some challenges in your life, like anxiety, depression, or whatever that stressor might be, like you said, an experience, but have not resolved it, can you become a good practitioner then? Or or
Oh,
or you have to have fixed your own, or at least for a large part, fix your own whatever it is that you might be going through to be able to provide.
thank you for reframing it for me. I think that It depends what are you treating. So if you, let's say you have anxiety, but you have not, sorry, let me reframe it, not anxiety, but a debilitating anxiety,
Mhm,
right? Because anxiety is a normal response, just
mhm,
experience. But with debilitating anxiety and you haven't really managed that and worked through that, and you're coming in to treat somebody with debilitating anxiety, I think that's going to be quite challenging.
right?
Right. So I think it depends. It's a very tricky thing. You want to make sure that because we all still have challenges. Like nobody is a sort of perfect after
Yes.
the therapy. It's an ongoing journey, but you want to be mindful when you come into therapy that your own challenge that you haven't worked through does not there's no transference of some of these feelings and thoughts onto your client.
Mhm. And
So go ahead.
how are you able to separate that, or how have you grown into become a professional that doesn't do that and it's there for the client, 100% available emotionally, if that makes sense?
Absolutely makes sense. I think what has obviously helps, right, is doing your own therapy. So most therapists, including myself, they would actually engage in therapy, their own therapy, while they are counseling others.
A
It's
therapist
very common
seeing a
practice.
therapist.
Most, like for listeners out there, most of the therapists actually have their own therapist at the same time, right?
Yes.
So you want to be continuing your journey, you want to continue to develop. And on top of that, if you encounter feelings that are coming up during the session that you can't resolve yourself, you would also turn to supervision
Mhm.
and have a supervisor, somebody could help you navigate this challenge. And you can, in that supervision, decide like what are the ways that you can mitigate this, navigate this, or maybe it might be even better to refer a client to someone else at this
Mhm.
point.
Wow, wonderful. Switching just a little bit, what would you tell? Because you said earlier in college, anxiety, relationships, social anxiety too. What would you tell to that version of yourself? If you talk to that Victoria back then, now, what would you tell that anxious and uncertain, overwhelmed Victoria?
Ooh, I think we could have a long conversation
We've
because
got some time.
I wish I could impart a lot of wisdom that I have now about relationships, about how I see the world, how I see myself as a woman. It's such a long conversation. I think there's one single thing that I would want to impart on my younger self, but maybe I would reassure her that everything will work out for her as a main component, that
Why is that?
everything will work out for you.
Why is that such a strong sentence for all humans? Everything will be okay. Don't worry. This, I know it's cheesy. Don't worry. Things will work out. Why do we need to hear that? And it's not just hear it verbally, but it needs to really stay. Why are we so worried all the time?
I think an inner child in us like needs reassurance everything is going to be okay. I think we just respond to that. Most of us respond quite well to that reassurance
Mhm.
because uncertainty is anxiety provoking, as you know. And
Yes.
if somebody tells us it's going to be okay, even if part of you kind of knows, like, okay, this might not be, it might be like a white lie to some extent, it still seems to calm down our nervous system when it's coming from a person who genuinely cares, right? Because it really matters how it's said. Like if it's said
Yes.
coldly from an authority figure, it does not have that impact. Let's be honest. It has
Yes.
to be you perceive care, you perceive love, you perceive that touch, and I think that maybe releases even oxytocin for us in the moment, which helps to relax.
Also, there's a physiology behind it. It's not just
Yeah.
okay. Wonderful. I want to ask you maybe one final question about you and your practice, and then we can go deep into the topic of mental health and the talker. You mentioned you had a after college there was an employment, but now you are a practitioner. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a self employment situation. How did you? Where did you get the courage to take that step, to make that step into the world? Because we talked about uncertainty, right? So it probably provoked some anxiety or
Of course it did. Of course. I think it kind of happened naturally. It wasn't so what happened, I worked following my graduation, I worked for a year as an employment counselor and then I transitioned to working as a counselor at university. That's always ironic actually. But I actually always wanted to work as a counselor at university, helping other students because
Mhm.
I struggled as a student. So it just felt like a natural transition. So I worked at University of Fraser Valley for 5 years, and it was immensely rewarding, immense experience. Like I absolutely loved everybody I worked with. And then an opportunity came along that I couldn't pass. And that opportunity was that I could go abroad with my partner at that time, and we could live abroad in Philippines with a family member. And I always wanted to be an expat. I always wanted to live abroad. So we took that chance, and that kind of led to transitioning into studying my own business.
Wow. Okay. And what? Okay, I didn't know that part about Philippines. What was that experience like? If you put it in a few sentences, did that make you? Did that contribute you to the person you are from a practice point of view for what you do today?
I'd say so because for a while there, that experience of being an expat, I almost tailored quite a bit of my practice at that time, which was fully online. You have to think about it that this was before COVID, so not very many people had online practices.
Hmm.
Like, just to give you context, I used Zoom in 2016,
Wow. Okay, I didn't
right?
even know
So
Zoom existed then.
most people didn't even know Zoom existed. Yes. So that was quite new to start a
Yes.
virtual practice, online practice fully at that time. So that was a big contributor. And that's how I kind of transitioned and doing mostly online therapy within my practice, and also meeting other expats, talking to them, getting some clients who were expats had really opened the world to even further diverse backgrounds and lives of
Yes.
people and what it's like to adjust to new life when you're not sort of permanently there. So I obviously encountered a lot of immigrants living in Canada, but there's a slight difference to it when you're an expat because you're always in transition.
Correct. And to somebody younger listening, to like somebody who wants to get into the field of mental health, like you did, or maybe even they are in mental health, but they want to transition to their own business, like you did, what would you tell them? I know that anxiety is there, but what advice would you give them in wanting to start their own practice?
Thinking part. Thank you for the question, Alex. I think if I was sort of thinking back, if I was starting out, I would say that start small. Like, don't jump in. Well, at least that's how I would. Start small, start a little bit, and you start to gain confidence as you begin going slow. So maybe rent an office per hour first, so you don't, kind of financially put yourself in a challenging position, and then begin kind of taking on a few clients, right? And with time, word of mouth, your practice starts to grow.
And it's a worth it experience, you would say now that when you're looking back?
Is it a worthwhile
Yeah.
experience to
Yes.
start your own practice?
Yes.
Well, I'd say being your own boss is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You
Wonderful.
can set your own holidays, you can set your own hours. I think for me, absolutely, yes, it's been a worthwhile experience to do
Wonderful.
that.
Well, I wish that the same for everybody. It doesn't matter in what business they're going to, but especially mental health because we need amazing people like you. Thanks for giving us a bit of context. I know it's short time, but we got to know you a little bit of your personal story, and then we will touch back on that as well. But I want to go more deeper to talk about mental health. And the first question to start us there is about the talker. When I say the talker in you, Victoria, what comes to mind?
I actually knew you were going to ask this question because I listened to your podcast.
Okay, it's a common one. I ask it all the time.
Yeah. Well, when I initially heard it on the podcast, I thought you were just referring to ongoing dialogue in your head,
Mhm.
which could be sometimes critical, but sometimes it could be not. It could be also cheering up. I don't know. It depends, right? But as I listen to more, I understand you're referring more to like the critical, fearful voice in us, right? In
Correct.
that context. Yeah. So I guess to answer, I had my own version of it at first, and then I kind of listened to what you're sharing, and I understand that it's more reference to the critical voice.
Yes. And when this talking about the critical voice, do you see it as something that you went through when the anxiety was happening for you? Was that voice present for you causing some of that?
Oh, big time. That's where it manifested in those thinking traps I mentioned, right? Like, so a thinking trap is a way of seeing the world as not realistic, like mind readings. I think they don't like me, but I don't have facts to back it up. I just think that, right? That's a
And
distortion.
our brain is amazing at this, right? The talker is a expert. You said no one likes me. I think there's not a human on this planet that hasn't heard that, right? At some point, but many hear it often. I've heard it often. You mentioned it. To say to myself, and then not this is probably not a correct sentence, but the talker saying, you don't likable, or right? How why would we even have a tolerance for such a statement in our minds?
It's a terrific question. I actually thought about it quite a lot last day as I was preparing. See, the reason why I thought so hard is because we only had language for about 200,000 years. So prior to that, we wouldn't have the talker. It's just thinking, could we be like harsh or critical or fearful, like scaring ourselves before that? Like, what would we do? Would we use pictures? but it wouldn't have the same impact like somebody calling your names inside of your head. So it just made me think that perhaps the development of this critical voice really came with language and culture, right? So maybe there is something to it, right?
Interesting.
Like maybe there is a function.
Interesting. I've never, maybe I didn't give it enough thought. Like you said, when did language come to humans? And you're right, life changed tremendously when, language, not, it didn't just come like that at once, but it had evolved, right? And it's still
Mhm.
evolving. So maybe, like you're saying, the talker initiated somewhere there and it has evolved since then to what it is today.
I presume something happened with
Yeah.
development of language that has introduced that. There's also this approach in therapy that I use called IFS, or internal family systems, and the way it looks at these voices, so to speak, it looks at it as if it's parts in us. So it would look at it as you have this critical part that maybe calls you names or criticizes you, but rather maybe like from some other approaches, you would try to get rid of it. Like you try to dismiss it or, put it away, go away, critic, or shut
Yes.
up. There's many approaches. I'm not saying any of them are wrong or anything, but this particular approach actually zooms in into that part. Let's look at it. Let's really see you. What are you about? What's your purpose? What are your challenges? What are your needs? And quite often, as you dialogue with that part, you start to discover there is a purpose, there is a need. And then we can negotiate with that part as to who else can take over and fulfill that need in the system of that human.
Interesting. With other guests I've had, they mentioned the IFS, that internal family system. It's an interesting approach, and what I'm finding interesting is that yes, there may be a purpose for the voice, but is there a purpose now? Was there a purpose 10 years ago, and now you still like? See, this is the challenge. I mean, I can speak from my childhood, and I've
Mhm.
often bring it because I'm not anymore shy to speak about it. Vulnerability is part of my journey, but yeah, maybe it supported me when I was a child because my father acted in a certain way, my mom acted in a certain way, and I had to have this voice. But they're not here now. I have my adult life, right? So why is it still yapping in my head?
Good point. I think it's, if we use a analogy with computers, like I think it's a software upload. You're right, right? It's something that was uploaded as an adaptive strategy at a young age. However, as you have grown up, it's no longer adaptive or effective. It's not serving you, but there's no other software that has been uploaded.
Can I get a new software, please? Upload. Where do we get?
Absolutely.
How do we get a new? So let's talk about that. People listen. Wait a minute. I need a new software.
Well, I think therapy is a fantastic way to get a new software upload. I think if you have a skilled therapist, you can absolutely modify a lot of these bugs. Something that became a bug, right, or something that was outdated software, you can absolutely do that. And that's where IFS, internal family systems, and EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, those approaches are actually what target and look what is happening, what voice there that you hear in the poker,
Yes.
which kind of talker isn't serving you, what belief systems does it support, like I'm not good enough, no one likes me, things like that. Okay, what is the belief system, right? And if that does that belief system serve you or no more, like maybe it's not functional anymore, right? So then with EMDR you can modify that belief system to be adaptive, like I am enough, for example.
And I mean, I know this is hard to say, or it's going to take 10 minutes or 10 days. Is there Oh, okay. Maybe I should ask this question. Is it guaranteed if you're disciplined, if I come to you or a person comes to you to see you and we're using this system, is it guaranteed that with discipline you have results? Can we say that? I mean, I guaranteed is a strong word, but is it always that you put effort, you see some results? Can we say that?
I would say so. The reason I'm slightly like reflecting here, I'm thinking the results may vary. The results may vary depending on your life experiences. So for somebody who had like average childhood with some painful moments versus somebody who had very like complex trauma in childhood and neglect, the results will vary for those individuals. But that's not to say that there wouldn't be benefit. The benefit would be and would be tremendous quite often, but the journey will be different.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And it's good to hear that. And I often ask this question is that, yes, it will vary. Everybody has a different experience, but the benefit of mental health working with a practitioner is, I think, undeniable. And this is where I was going with it. And like you said, it would differ the speed at which a person heals or improves, but there's always benefit to working with somebody.
Absolutely. burnout, right? Because what happens, you can read therapy books, you can listen podcasts. That's beneficial, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of a little bit like, let's say you were trying to fix the car, so you start reading the manual for fixing the car, but if you never get to the car to actually practice what you are reading, you're not really gonna create much change, right?
Yes, agreed, 100%. And I think a lot has changed, at least in these Western countries, Canada, US, and others. A lot has changed about bringing more awareness. There's more and more practitioners that are supporting that change, which is great. But I think there's still room for more, Victoria. And this is partially why I'm doing this, is to bring more awareness. And I hopefully one day it becomes like just like you're going to the gym every other day or whatever, it becomes so common to work with a wonderful individual, because mental health, just like your muscles, you have to practice. It's not a 5 minute and never look at it again, right?
Yes, I think it's a journey where you continue to develop yourself over and over. Just like with a physical exercise, you don't stop at a particular age.
Yeah.
You continue going to the gym or doing whatever workout. And I think it's the same with our mental health. There's maintenance and development if we want to do with it.
Agreed. Well, if we put money aside, why then people shy away? Okay, not everybody, but it's not everyone that openly talks about and goes to mental health practitioner of any kind, whether it's a counselor, a psychologist, whatever it might be. Why is there still a barrier both to talk about it and to openly go?
True. I think we've kind of come a long way about talking about mental health. I think we see a lot of people of influence even speak about their mental health journey. So I think the stigma has tremendously reduced, even in my own country where I come from, which was, I would say, slower to adjust that. Like there is tremendous openness now about
Wow,
seeing psychologists and practicing psychotherapists. Yeah, it's really sort of a big turnaround.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I think there has been tremendous change. However, I think, yes, there are still internal obstacles. I think the one of the biggest one, and the one I have, like I personally had this one, and I still sometimes hear from people. This one is, so when I was a student at UBC, there were counseling services. Like I was aware there were counseling
Yes,
services. But my thought process was that you only go to see one like if you're in extremely dire circumstances, like you're suicidal, like you're
yeah,
just completely just lost. That
yes,
was my thought process. Like you only do it in extreme
as
circumstances.
a final resource.
Yes, yes. That was my ignorance at that point in life, but that's assumption I made. Of course, I have learned that it's not the case. As a matter of fact, you do the most insightful deep therapy when you're not in a crisis. When
Yeah,
you come into therapy in crisis, you're managing a crisis.
yes,
You're managing. That's it. The managing. And when we're managing, that is not necessarily a great point of growth when we
yes.
just manage it.
Agreed. So there's a value, and you're not the first one to say a value to actually work with someone as a maintenance tool, not as just firefighting
Yeah.
a crisis, right? Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. I agree with you. But speaking about the practice, I want to ask you: you see a lot of clients on a daily basis. In what way does the talker most commonly show up for your clients? And yes, please, because this is a good question.
That is a very good question.
Is it the critic?
So great question, Alex. I think the most prominent way, even behind the critical, like initial critical voice, is a fearful voice. And there is a really a lot of deep fear behind it. So even though it's may present at the surface as anger, I would say fear is a paramount, predominant piece. We have fear to be seen, to be heard, to be ourselves. We fear rejection, abandonment. So when we distill everything, we get to like a really vulnerable self underneath that.
Fear. It's such a. I agree from what I've heard, people I've met, and just conversations with people on the podcast. Fear seems to be kind of a underlying, right? Another one that I hear is "I'm not enough." That's a common one. Is
Big
it
one.
connected to fear? I'm not enough, or it's a
Yeah, I'm not enough. People are gonna abandon me. They're gonna leave me. They're gonna not be around, right? Why, why, why do I have to be enough? For who? What happens if I'm not enough?
yes.
Like, what happens? Why is it so vital? And usually there's a piece where I have to earn something with being enough.
So we are not, I mean, when we first come, we are born to this world. We don't necessarily come with this software, right? Like you said, software, you're not good enough, and all the fears you have. We don't have that. So can we presume or assume, probably the better word, that all these fears and these statements, traps that you call them, and I love that, and that feed the talker really have been have been accumulated through childhood?
I think it's pretty fair to say that because most of the software is uploaded in the childhood, right?
Mhm.
That's where
Yes.
we are learning, observing, really the the plasticity of neurons is the highest, right? So going from what you said, right, when we come into this world, when we're born, if we just put epigenetics aside, because that
Yes.
makes things complicated, but if we don't count that in, then we're born with our truest form of self, right?
Mhm.
Like free of trauma, pain, judgment, right? Like in IFS, it's called your true self, compassionate, joyful, loving self.
No talkers. No,
No, no
the
talkers,
show is
no.
not going on yet.
No, I mean, as a baby, babies
Yes.
don't have the language
Yes.
to even have that, right? Like, think about that. Babies don't have language, right?
Yes. Correct.
So they wouldn't even have that. Yeah.
So, yeah,
And then the
please.
software, right, starts to upload, right? And that software is not just the parents. Of course, parents are primal elements of that, but it's also our society, right? Like kindergarten, school environment. What we observe happens to others, right? Sometimes we don't have to experience something bad ourselves, but if we see somebody else being punished for something
True.
and that really affects the nervous system, it can feel like as if it happened to us. We can develop a fearful response as if it happened to me. And so we wire, like, what's the safest way for us to be in this world? And we arrive at this concoction in our minds. But of course, I do want to mention that this is also an interaction with your genes, right? Like the hardware is the genes, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
some people have more predisposition towards anxiety through the genetic composition. And so that probably will influence how their talker is leaning into, right?
Interesting. So when they come to you, clients, they've already had this software developed or
Yes.
uploaded and written, right? The talker is loud often and the narrative is there. So your job seems, and practitioners like you, seems to be very difficult because now you come, there's a person with inherited this kind of software. You have to like clean, rewrite, right? That seems like how do you start?
You're right. It's quite a task, depending
Yes.
especially on, what's where the client is coming from, like what happened to them, what's their life story. But you start small. You're not going to tell them, let's overhaul you in the first session. But you look at, okay, what is the concern right now? What's challenging the most? And you start with small tweaks, small changes in their belief systems or the way they view the world. I quite often the big part of focus of the practice initial stages is to create an alternative to this harsh voice. And that comes with reconnecting with our true self. Like the way that we're meant to be. So a big emphasis in my practice in the beginning is to create this inner resource, kind of like a figure that's benevolent and loving to us no matter what. So we might sometimes have we might borrow an image from somewhere like Mary Poppins or someone else like that we perceive to be loving and kind, and we would integrate and internalize it to be the new talking figure, but it's now a loving talking figure, right? That clients can call upon, right? So like internalized resource. And that's often quite essential if children might not had supportive parents.
Yes.
So they're missing completely like the software for positive regards, supportive attunement, things like that.
Yes.
So we essentially can integrate that as adults, even if you didn't have it as a child, we can integrate and bring it into your nervous system as if it has happened. Do you know
Yeah.
why? Do you know how we can do that? We can do that because we can use this fantastic thing in our brain, right? That allows us to simulate reality. Like our brain's exceptionally good at simulating reality,
Yes.
right? That's where the talker comes in. The talker can like scare us and create these horrible images, and we have like cortisol and adrenaline flying in our
Yes.
body, right? As if it's happening.
Yes.
But we can employ it and we can do a simulation of the opposite of the loving, supportive,
Cool.
kind figure supporting us in the moment when we should have been supported,
I
saying
like.
just the right things, and you get the release of oxytocin and other hormones in your spirit is related to distressing and calmness of nervous system.
Beautiful.
So we use the same tool that that initially causes us anxiety, but employed in a way that actually gonna bring a regulation
Wonderful.
of the nervous system, a calm.
Wonderful. I wish that it's so powerful because the brain, even though it simulates things like you said, the brain, ironically, we talk about present moment, but the brain is always in the present. What I mean by that is it experiences these projections as if it's happening now. So
Yes,
it's
yes,
in the
exactly.
present in a way, right? Even though you're projecting past and future. If we go back to that true self that you were saying,
Uh-huh.
you know, when we are born without all this software, can you? Is it possible to get to, or humans as to get to a stage where we don't have to do all this work now because we'll do it right. We'll write the good software from the beginning. Do you think that's, I mean, a
That would be
possible?
amazing. I
Yeah.
love that idea. I'm trying to imagine the context in which that will happen. Like, I don't know, we might be raised by a robot instead of a human.
Okay, so it's possible, but like it's highly unlikely, or
Uh,
a lot has to change.
Yeah, there's a complexity, right, to this talker, right? Because it's also culture specific, for
Yes,
example,
it
right?
is.
Like in certain culture, like, thinking back to my own culture, I think there was certain harshness and criticism within culture that is accepted and tolerated, right? That might not be tolerated, like, let's say in Canadian culture, right? And so, but that might be the kind of software develop adjust you to that culture. It makes you adjusted to that culture.
Correct.
So what I'm trying to say with this is that there is a cultural component to it. So
Yes,
when you think about how do we have a human that has this perfect software, but perfect for what? Because humans are meant to be adjusting to the environment they're in.
correct, correct.
So what is the perfect environment where
No,
there's no
it's
stress? But if we introduce environment with no stress, that's also problematic, right?
yes. No, absolutely. That's why I said this is a hypothetical question.
Yeah, cool.
But then the other question that might be coming out of that, now that we have often we come up with this software that is oft can be negative for anxiety causing or depression, etc. And that true self is still there, right? That true self I was born with, that
Uh-huh.
pure self is still there. Can that self emerge and all of a sudden drop the talker and all this negative and say, not through work, but like enough is enough today. Absolutely, well, wake up, let go, surrender. I've heard teachers say that it's possible and they've achieved this nirvana all of a sudden. Is this likely impossible, Victoria?
Everything is possible, Alex. I don't, I'm not going to argue something is impossible. I think it's possible, but again, you said teachers, right? So I imagine they practice something,
Yeah, true.
right? Like they didn't just, I don't know, working on Wall Street and I woke up the next day and
The
I had
enlightened.
that epiphany. Like I think when you look at the people who maybe had these transitions, it's possible to have a transition without therapy for other means of therapy. So what I mean by that is you can certainly achieve tremendous results for meditation, right? Without necessarily coming to see a psychotherapist. What I'm saying, you can meditate every day and you're gonna have changes. You're gonna experience transitions and changes. I don't know if nirvana would be the end of it, but I'm trying to say you can create um, psychedelics is another form, right, that can create epiphanies and great insights, right?
Yes.
So
Well, the reason
yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
asking is because sometimes I feel like it's unfairly advertised, whether it's psychedelics or teachers or
Mhm.
nirvana, like you said, or these kind of gurus that that almost promote this complete, of almost unrealistic state in a everyday living. It can be
Uh,
misleading, I think, because like you said, first it takes work, and I think it's good to take work, a journey, right? Like you're working through things. Like you said, stress is part of because it pushes you to grow. There's challenges, there's change. So what would happen if everybody instantly have this awakening nirvana moment? I don't think that's realistic, and it's
hmm,
not fair to be advertised that way. I don't think. This is my personal.
you're right. I mean, that could be partially false advertising, right? I think the tricky part with advertising is that people will maybe promise something um, that theoretically possible, but maybe not practically possible, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it adds more anxiety to people, I think. It added it to me, Victoria, right?
Ah, right.
Look at this guru. He's enlightened. He's sitting in the air, right? And it happened to him in 2 days, or right? But then he's not telling you 20 years of practice, for example, right, that
Mhm.
he's had, right?
Absolutely, that would be quite unrealistic. I think nowadays in social media there is a promise like that. Oh, you do this program, you're gonna make, $100,000 in a week. I
Yes.
now that it's basically kind of expanded in the mental health field, right?
Yes.
It didn't used to be necessarily with YouTube and rise of influencers. I think it expanded in YouTube in mental health field. And I think it has the same problem with it, right? That where if you don't achieve that result and you come to this guru and say, I didn't achieve this result, they're going to say, you didn't try hard enough, right? Like that's an easy way out to say you
Yes.
just didn't try hard enough, right?
Yes, I
Or
agree.
you're getting in the way of your own success.
On your
Yeah.
way of your own
Yeah.
success.
So yeah, you want to be mindful of who you
Yeah.
pay attention to in the world of
Yeah.
social media and influences and gurus, because yes, there's a lot of false advertisement out there.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that we brought that up for the viewers and listeners. I want to switch topic just a little bit. You work
Uh-huh.
with couples, and maybe I want to ask you a couple questions that in couples therapy. That's what it's called. And in what role does the talker, that voice, play in conflict, especially around intimacy, closeness? Can you tell us a bit about it? Have you noticed?
Of course, I'd be happy, Alex. The one thing I want to mention, I'm transitioning at this point out of couples therapy.
Okay.
Like I still have a few couples in my caseload, but I'm not taking new couples at this time. And that's due to some, maybe I'll comment a little bit later on
Okay.
why, because I want to answer your question.
Please.
But I can still answer your question because I had experience working with couples. I think that piece with the thinking traps often comes in when two people interact with each other and people get caught up in their own thinking traps. So I'll give you an example that's probably easiest to demonstrate. So let's imagine a couple in front of us, and there's a woman, and she says, well, I'd like to do something on my own this Saturday. We spent quite a bit of time together, and I really want to just do something on my own, right? Totally normal, right?
Mhm.
And then, for example, I'll ask the partner, so could you repeat what your partner said? What do you hear? And so the partner would say, I heard she doesn't want to spend time with me. She's sick of it, right? Like,
Yes.
that's not what she said. So it's a distortion, right? Like he has filtered what his partner said through the distortion that I'm not wanted, I'm rejected,
Yes.
right? And he basically created a story of his own, which has
That's the
nothing to
talker.
do.
That's
That's
the
the talker.
talker, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's a negative bias, right? It's filtering through, I forgot which thinking trap that would be, but it's really filtering through that
Yes.
negative bias. Yes.
You know, one of the first videos I ever did about the topic was about, I called it at the time, talkerless couples. And what I meant by that is my personal experience in relationships and even knowing people is like, I realized that we don't even have authentic, often, not all, authentic relationships. It's almost like a talker having a relationship with another talker. Because like you said, like my talker is hearing something what my partner is saying and interprets it often not correctly. And their talker would be doing similar things. So you're having an interaction between two talkers,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. That can happen, right? So part of like when people come to couples therapy is to begin developing the self-awareness of this talker, is become observant of your thinking traps and try and practice trying to capture exactly what your partner says. So like we are actively practicing to remove those filters so you can meet your partner where they are and they can meet you where you're at.
I love it.
So that we're moving to that authentic interaction that you are speaking about.
Okay, I'll continue on the path of asking you about things that you
Mhm.
do in your practice, and I want to talk about differentiation. Maybe say a few words about what it is and how does it help or could help staying grounded and outside of the voice.
Differentiation. Ah, I love the differentiation piece. Differentiation has saved my relationship, okay?
Oh,
I,
okay.
I will be this honest and blunt here that I struggled in my relationship. And when I took a training called couples developmental therapy model, and that's where they had an emphasis on differentiation. I have done some trainings for couples therapy before, but none of them really define this concept of differentiation. And differentiation really is about understanding who you are in terms of what I feel, what are my needs and wants. So becoming aware of that, then being able to comfortably and calmly communicate that to my partner, and then my partner being able to do the same,
The same.
like they're able to understand what they think, want, and need, and they can communicate relatively calmly that to me. And even though their needs and wants might be conflicting with mine, I can hold steady and not freak out, not get defensive, right? I can hold steady with that and breathe for that and be okay with the differences. Like I don't sort of take in it as a huge threat that we're different in some way. Like for example, it could be a minimal example, like I want to have Italian for dinner and you want to have Chinese. That's probably not a high stake, right? But if we're talking about I want to live in the country and you want to live in the city, there could be a lot of emotion comes up and people feel like they need to right away bridge that gap. That's different. We need to close this. we need to close this gap. We need to be on the same. We need to be the same. They freak out. Used to be me, absolutely, right. So I would freak out. I wouldn't know what to do because the sameness is very much can be like comforting in some way,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But you can't be the same all the time. It gets boring, and it's not gonna work in the
Uh-huh.
relationship long term. Most of the time, we struggle with that the gap, the differences, and we can react to the gap and differences in two ways, usually in non-healthy ways, which either we're going to try and dominate and kind of get big and angry, and we try to dominate the other person and get them to bridge that gap by submitting to what we want and need, or we withdraw and shut down, get quiet,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
maybe even comply, but in that quiet, resentful way. It is about closing the gaps to some extent, right? So when you're able to hold steady with the differences, when you practice that, you can approach your partner with curiosity. You can ask them open-ended questions. You can ask, why does it mean so much to you? What does living in a country represent to you, right? How long do you want to live in a country? You become open to explore their
Oh,
perspective. They become open to explore your perspective. And now, with the openness, we can actually move towards perhaps finding a solution that might work for both of us.
okay. I see what you mean. Okay.
But
That
if
is
we
what.
respond in a reactive way, we never get the depth, and we
Yes.
might come up to surface solutions that one person, yes,
Mhm.
yes, let's do that. And they forget, they don't do that. Like they are not fully aligned. They don't agree, right?
Understand. And that
Yeah.
gives the chance to the talk to start creating stories about your partner. Oh, she wants
Hmm.
Italian again, and look, she never cares about like right,
Yeah,
like you were saying. No,
exactly.
it's so beautiful. Can I ask? There was another question I really wanted to ask you, and it was about differentiating when you first help a client. Let me put it this way: when you first help a client understand that they're not the voice in their head, right? What is the experiencing? What is the experience that they go through? Can you describe maybe what is there an aha moment? What happens when they first realize it?
I think most of the time the way they would experience that is for us developing this loving figure that I mentioned, like the connection to the true self. It's either going to look like them, their true loving, joyful self, or we might borrow from a character, like I mentioned, like Mary Poppins. And so it's experiencing the opposite of the critical, the fearful, is the experience of support
Yes,
and warmth that allows them to really feel the difference. And what they typically report is like, my body just fully relaxed. Oh, my nervous system just kind of unwind. That knot disappeared. Like it's just like being surrounded by a warm blanket. I think your nervous system just like
yes.
deflates.
What a
Does
wonder.
that
And
answer your question? Is
it
that
does
kind of
perfectly, and
yeah?
it begs another question on this last one on that one. How does he feel in the room when, well, I guess many are virtual, but you probably can sense some of that even through the virtual image. What does that talk-free moment feel like energetically?
Well, I think my mirror neurons are also activated. I also like with them in
Yes.
that same wavelength kind of feel relaxed and joyful. Like I think it's this really warm joy that penetrates the room that they feel, I feel, and it's just present in the air.
Wow, beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
I wish that for everybody as much and as often as possible because I believe that's how life is meant to be lived. Not all the time, because like you said, you're gonna
Mhm.
have challenges, fine. But now it's the opposite. It's almost never. Throughout the day, you
Mhm.
almost never have these moments. So it's right. Where does the body regenerate? Where do you have these ventilations and moments to vent out and recharge and have these moments, right? And that's what's causing
Absolutely.
trouble.
I agree. There is definitely a challenge with finding space and time. And one of the things that I invite all my clients to do because I think it's a reasonable practice in terms of time and effort to do every day is write out for a couple of minutes in a notebook like all your thoughts, worries, concerns. It seems kind of silly. What is that gonna do for me, right? But actually there is research that supports it. When people write every day for a few minutes on something that's important, valuable, anxiety provoking for them, the research showed that like after a few months, well, I think it was like a month and a half. I can't remember actually how long they studied it, but they looked at the participants and they found that their well-being of the group that has written about relevant things has significantly improved. And there was even weight loss. They even reported weight loss for those who wanted to lose weight.
Yes.
They even reported weight loss because obviously we tend to kind of indulge in things when we're stressed and the cortisol is high. So it's a beneficial way to distress. It's free and it doesn't have to. I'm not talking about writing for 20 minutes. Like I'm talking about, okay, put it down for a couple of minutes, right? And one way I like to think about it, it's like an emotional hygiene, right? You brush your teeth every day, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You hygiene for your teeth.
Twice, three
This is
times a
a
day.
yeah. So it's a hygiene for your brain. So all the yucky things, the stress, the anxiety that accumulated throughout the day, it has to go somewhere. Otherwise, you're taking it to your bed. So if you can write it for a couple of minutes, you dump it all on paper, you are brushing your brain, so to speak.
Wow, I love it. Brushing your brain. I'll take this because I haven't heard it quite like that. I mean, this has been said a lot about writing, right? But brushing your brain is something that you can remember, right?
I'm glad that's connected.
Did
Yes.
you brush your
People
brain
brush your
today?
brain
Yeah,
before
did you
bed.
brush your brain. Yes. So to my son, I can say like, "Hey, you brush your teeth? Yes. Did you brush your brain? Right?"
I love it. I love it.
Now, like this one of our previous questions I was asking about how we can improve the software of the children and the true self is through us becoming better and being better parents.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it's happening. A lot of people are, I know, on a level of mental health, I'm much better equipped than my parents were. I know from experience because I was the kid
Of
and
course.
now I'm the parent.
Yeah.
So I'm stopping some of the crap that they unloaded to me. They didn't mean to, but still happened.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna didn't do it to my first son, and I'm not gonna do it to my second that I'm expecting.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing, right, Alex? Because you're somebody on the path of creating better life, not just for yourself, but for your
yeah,
children, right? For growth and self-development and your desire to look at yourself fully, right? And do the hard work, right? Because it's not easy to look at
no,
some parts of us and to face certain emotions. I think it takes courage,
yeah,
right?
it totally does. I know we are over the 1 hour that
Hmm.
we committed to the customer, but the conversation is great, and I want to ask a few more questions, and
Sure.
we will have a part two to this, Victoria, in the future, and we can
I
have
would
a
love to.
right? And more, we can even have a more concrete topic. Now we went all over the place,
Hmm.
which is because that mental health topic is so large, right? Uh,
Oh,
I want to
endless.
ask you about Philippines. I mean, I know that you know you were born in one country, lived in Canada, lived in Philippines. Is mental health a different game, or at least a different? Is it different in all the countries, or are we all experiencing similar struggles as humans?
I would say that we do experience similar struggles across developed cultures. So, like cultures exposed to globalization. I do think that tribal cultures, like those isolated cultures, are probably having different experiences than us
Oh, for sure.
because just I was actually again reflecting on that idea of what is the environment that we were originally developed, like our brain and nervous system had developed in small tribal groups, hunter-gatherer society, right? Like that's what our brain is best adjusted to, right? Notice small groups, right?
Not as well.
Like
Yes.
that's where the social anxiety is a big part, right? Of and prevalent is because we actually probably not as well kind of equipped to exist in large groups. And actually, when you go in public transit, like it's a small stressor for people, like being
Yes.
in large crowds, it's a stressor. And you start to notice it more and more as you age. Like when you're young, you don't really care much, but as you age, you're gonna start
You
like,
can notice it.
yeah, you start you need the crowds.
You notice a lot of things as that you as you age. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I'm not sure. That's maybe a different conversation. But
Yeah.
yes, you're totally right. So it's not easy to say, oh, Philippines has a better handle on mental health as a country versus Canada or vice versa.
Say that I'm very careful. Like first of all, I haven't lived in the Philippines for a
Uh-huh.
while, and so it's been a few years. So perhaps there's now even greater awareness, but Philippines has a lot of challenges that are around basic needs for many people.
True.
And so when you face basic needs challenges, it's a completely different game. Like
Yes.
mental health is not even a priority, is not a thing because when you're just trying to put food on the table,
Yeah. Sadly.
it's a whole different thing. And I think even if you're somebody who is better off, is you're financially settled, not for everyone, but there's still like some people who can be quite ignorant. Like I remember my encounter with a guide. So we took a tour. We took a
Uh-huh.
tour when we arrived. Of course, I wanted to see Manila, and this individual has found out what my husband is doing in IT professional, and I was doing in mental health. And he's like, "We have a lot of jobs for IT. We don't have any jobs for you." Like because we're all happy here,
Yeah.
and which is the stereotype about right Philippine in people from Philippines is that they're always happy. But just because somebody smile does not mean anything of what's
Agreed.
happening internally, right?
Agreed.
So I think what he has said is maybe slight reflection at that time. This is 2016 we're talking about ignorance of and class division that exists in that society.
Agreed. You said
Because the
something very
poverty can be quite overwhelming in the way it's experienced.
you said very powerful things, and one for sure, if you have to put food on the table, mental health is not I
Mm,
mean, we're privileged in countries like Canada, like the
amazing.
majority of people. But you also said something also very important about being ignorant, saying, well, we don't need this, because I grew up in a country that they, and some still, many actually still believe
Uh,
mental, what is this, there's a voodoo thing, like get over
uh,
yourself, and there's nothing wrong with you, anxiety, right? Like that's
mhm,
not something that a lot of, especially men in Bulgaria where I come from, they don't take that serious, right? Still to this day. So
mhm.
I can totally see where you are coming with that. Uh, But anyway, we do have to have a
Of course.
final question for you, and it's our ending question. I always ask back to the talker: if your talker Victoria was a real human being standing in front of you right now, what would you tell her?
What I would want to ask the talker, like the negative, tell me more. What's going on? I would ask, tell me more. What's happening? Because I would lean into the IFS. Like, I want to really see and hear you. What are you on about? Like, what are your needs? What are you worried about? Yeah, I think I would lean into that and really explore it for these questions that I have.
Yeah, it will tell you more. It's a talker. It will tell you more. It talks, but totally understand. Like get to figure out what's going on. What's actually behind below that conversation,
Yeah,
let's
like what
say.
are you scared? What are you angry
Mhm.
about? Like what are your needs? Because then it doesn't hang on to that agenda anymore, right? Like when you
Yes,
can meet its needs in other ways,
love it.
and it disempowers that voice by empowering that part of you, like by connecting it to a loving, kind, gentle voice.
Wonderful. We covered quite a few kind of angles and parts of mental health. Is there anything that we didn't say or we didn't cover enough, maybe, that you'd like to leave our viewers and listeners with?
I think there's so much that I could have added. Well, I would want to share that I think in my practice, right? Maybe I didn't get a chance to maybe talk a little bit about my practice, but a big emphasis in my practice is in relationships, right? While I might not be taking any more new couples, but I do individual relationship therapy. And the reason why I focused on relationships, well, first of all, I struggled myself. Like I could not, for the love of me, understand like how do people have healthy relationships? So I was like, okay, I gotta crack this. Like I gotta figure this out. This is where that differentiation piece
Mhm.
comes in where that I learned, started to apply. And I think the relationships is we don't exist without relationships, right? We're surrounded by people all the time. And so has such a profound effect on our well-being, such a profound effect on our well-being. So if you know how to navigate relationships effectively, if you know how to set boundaries, if you understand where you start and where the other person and then you end and where the other person begins, because there's so much fusion, there's so much symbiosis that we encounter where we overfunction, try to fulfill other people's wants and needs that we are not even capable of fulfilling.
Yes,
So we contribute to a lot of anxiety sometimes by engaging in relationships in these dysfunctional ways. So what I would encourage people is develop healthy skill sets for relationships. It is something that you can actually master and develop. You might want to go address your software, the software where you address some fears and anxieties about like, oh, if I establish boundary, I'm going to be abandoned. Okay, let's that belongs to your inner child. Like even if you're abandoned now as an adult, you're going to be okay. It's your
yes,
inner child freaking out, right? So address the software stuff and then upload the new way of how you can engage effectively with here I am and here you are, and let's interact as adults now, right?
beautiful.
I think it's so profound. And I see amazing transformations when I work online or where I practice in the office in Nanaimo. I see amazing transformations from people who take this journey and they can have better lives and bring joy to other people as a result.
That was wonderful. Relationships. I mean, we, for the most part, spend most of our life in some sort of a
Mhm.
relationship or relationships, whether it's your partner or work or whatever it might be. So, absolutely develop these skills because it's going to improve your life on every level. Thank you, Victoria. It's hard to describe what an honor it was to speak with you, the positiveness that you bring, the smiles, and even though we talk about serious topics here, but it doesn't mean that we cannot smile and have an enjoyable time. And you did that. You brought that, and I'm hoping that our viewers and listeners got that same energy and vibe from you that I got. It was amazing. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you, Aleks. It has been a pleasure and honor. Thank you for inviting me. And
A big thank you, Victoria, for being our guest.
thank you, Aleks. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Mind Tribe. Share it or leave me a note. Remember, your talker isn't you, presence is. Less talker, more presence. See you next time.